much. Before I begin, I would like to thank you all for your attendance to this session. As one of its co-organizers, I hope you find it quite productive. And I'm here today as a representative of a wider research collective. This research collective is named RomanArmy.eu and is integrated by different archaeologists and professionals which share their interest on the study of the changes, political, cultural, economic, social changes which took place in northwestern Iberia due to the presence of the Roman military first and the Roman power after the previous moment, after the first moments of this conflict, the conquest in Augustan era. And up to date, our main success was the development of a methodology for the detection and documentation study of Roman military sites in this area, but we want to go further. We want to explore not only new techniques and methodologies, but also to build new narratives about the conquest and assimilation of this wide area by the Roman power. About the northwestern Iberia, well, it's an area not really densely populated, and actually the population is concentrated on coastal areas. Compared to other territories, is quite deserted sometimes. And it also shows quite a political fragmentation. This territory is divided between two countries, Spain and Portugal, but also we can find several lesser administrative units, at least in the case of Spain. The presence of the autonomous regions is quite challenging sometimes because we need to deal with different heritage laws, heritage management bodies, and etc. And also the degree of openness and accessibility to certain databases, and namely remote sensing related databases, LiDAR, aerial photography, etc. It's quite diverse from a territory to the others. We also have a quite diversified landscape. We have high mountain ranges up to 2,000 meters high, also open valleys and extensive crop fields, and also steep valleys with predominant smallholding, densely covered areas with forests and dense vegetation canopy. So that's quite challenging when you have to develop methodologies for the detection of these sites I already mentioned. Because the Roman military sites, especially temporary camps, are quite invisible on the field. They weren't planned as permanent sites, so you are going to find only, if you are lucky enough, a trench or a couple of trenches and one rampart, if something remains from them, because other devices, other defensive devices such as this valley, these wooden sticks had been completely rotten and disappeared, because that's another condition in our area. The soils are quite very acidic, so the preservation of organic material is really hard. So, as I said, when you go on field, you find these kind of things. If you are not aware of the nature of these sites, you can misinterpret these ramparts or trenches, and you can think they are boundaries for grazing or agricultural purposes. In other areas, the dense vegetation canopy also doesn't allow you to really document these structures, and only under special conditions of lighting or snow melting you can document these sites to a wider extent. Even after the excavation of these sites, as you can see in these pictures, the entity of these sites is not monumental, so it's really complicated to document them. That's the reason why we developed this methodology. We combine the use of historical photography, also satellite imagery, LiDAR resources. My colleagues have already, especially Joe, explained everything about LiDAR, and so I'm not going to go further in this topic. And also photogrammetry used in historical photography we have used, and that's particularly useful in order to reconstruct lost landscapes, places that were destroyed because of the construction of infrastructures or the expansion of cities, etc. And we have tried to combine these more modern techniques with traditional techniques on field survey, like the study of the old cartographies, the study of place names, and also asking local people, trying to recall oral traditions. And every single piece of evidence documented by this means was, after that, of course, traced on field. We visited these sites and we tried to better document them in order to notify their presence to the authorities, because, as I said, they are quite fragile, and as soon as we act, as soon as we try to protect them, the better. In this process, the importance of LiDAR has been incredible, because several sites were discovered only by using this technique. Even if we were quite suspicious about the location of possible camps, we weren't able to document them because they were covered with vegetation, or these fields weren't accessible sometimes. We started to study these Roman military camps, especially in high mountain ranges, because supposedly, or well, not supposedly, the Roman army followed these high mountain ranges as they were their own. They were their paths across the territory. The faster way to move in this mountainous area was following these mountain ranges. So we were suspicious about the location of new camps, but we hadn't the resources to document them. And thanks to the use of LiDAR, we documented new sites, big sites, not only in these mountainous areas, but also in other areas which had been more affected due to plowing, like these two camps you can see here. The problem is that this data comes from the 2010, 2009 or so 7 years, 8 years, 9 years ago, and some of these sites have completely disappeared. So that's the reason why we really think it's necessary to act as soon as possible. This was the first phase of our methodology, and the second phase of our methodology was to go to these sites, to try to better document them, to try to clean the defenses and record them, and if possible to excavate, to open some exploratory trenches to record the morphology of its defenses, and also we are using artifactual and also metal detecting surveys in order to recover as many materials as possible. Because, as I said, the soils are quite acidic, and the deterioration of these materials is also another problem we need to deal with. And we are also using drones and other cost-effective technologies in order to gather as much information as possible. The quantitative effects of this methodology, of the use of this methodology, have been quite striking. Only 10 Roman military sites were known by the end of the decade of 1980. And now we have more than 60. But the fact is that from these 60 sites where the Roman military presence has been attested, 32 were discovered by members of this research collective during the last 10 years. And since we work as a team, as we work together, the last 2 years, 17 sites. So it's quite a striking, from a quantitative point of view, the effects of working together and to, people coming from different specialities and with different ideas. So we have a constant activity. Actually, this very afternoon, we were receiving WhatsApp messages from another colleague who is on field, and he's documenting one new Roman military camp, so 61 probably. And the problem is that from a qualitative point of view, the panorama is not that optimistic, because we still lack monographies and holistic approaches to the study of this data. We don't have a strict or uniform terminology. We don't have proper morphological characterization and classification of these sites. We have quite diversified and heterogeneous data. We need to put all that and try to standardize, trying to find the variables to study this data as a whole. But I think that's the effect of young discipline, and we are looking forward filling these gaps. We're trying to do it so. Also, there are another background problems or background handicaps. There's no solid traditional landscape archaeology focused on Roman times in northwestern Iberia, and also the GIS analyses have not been really explored in this concrete period. Also, the connection between Iron Age specialists and Roman Age specialists is not as good as we wanted, etc. So What we are trying to do is put some order on this all heterogeneous data and try to better characterize these sites and recognize their diversity, the diversity of the archaeological record, because until not so many years ago, people thought that it only could be a Roman camp with a square plan, and now we are discovering different solutions, sometimes polygonal, sometimes circular, and completely irregular. So we are trying to document certain elements, distinctive elements, like the way the gates are fortified or other defensive features, in order to identify new sites. And since we have more information, we can better understand what's happening here. We are also using a spatial GIS spatial analysis, in this case locational patterns, in order to better understand the context of the sites, the visibilities, the accessibility, why the Romans choose that place and not other to set their camps. Also, as Joao explained before, the use of this mobility analysis from a point given are also revealing connections between the sites we have already discovered, but are also leading us to the documentation of new sites. That's quite interesting too, and we are working really hard on this topic, at least during the last months. 5 minutes, okay. And so now we can try to create new narratives using all this data. As I said, is some of the conclusions or some of the information we have is provisional. We need to go on field. We need to better study these sites. We need to better survey them. But some of these sites, due to its location, due to the connection with other pieces of this great panorama the connection between sites led us to the certain interpretations. If these Roman sites are following the very same high mountain range, okay, we know this is a transit zone. We need to analyze if these camps belong to the very same moment or not. But it looks like some of them belong to the period of the Augustan conquest, the Asturian and Cantabrian wars in these areas. Asturian conflict in here, and the Cantabrian conflict in here. Other sites are far away from this scenario, far away from this war scenario, and could be related to previous initiatives of the Roman army to conquest this or to absorb these territories, or maybe they are just from the moment after. Mobility is one of the main characteristics of the Roman army. And other sites are related to the the later occupation of this area during the 1st century AD. They are permanent sites, so it's quite obvious they are not related to the conquest. But that's only one part of the history. If we want to have the whole picture, we also need to, as I said before, to build bridges between Iron Age specialists and Roman period specialists in order to understand what happened with the local communities. We know that these communities were completely transformed. Sometimes the conflict was quite violent from a physical point of view, so it's quite obvious that there was a destruction of these sites or not. In other cases, there are processes of abandonment, but we have mainly focused on these destructive processes, and we haven't analyzed what happened in the inside of these hill forts and of these little fortified towns. And we have also detect or document changes in the material culture, changes in the way they build their houses, changes in, maybe they are reflecting some hierarchization of the societies or changes. We have also documents from the Roman times that reveal certain agreements between the Romans, the new power, and other eminent figures in these local communities. So we have to go deeper and to try to integrate all this data, all this dispersed data in our interpretation of what happened in these territories during the 1st century AD, BC and 1st century AD. So we need to walk towards conflict archaeology, or real conflict archaeology, and the use of post-colonial hypotheses and approaches could be really nice. We are trying to explore other conflicts all across history in which we can find an asymmetrical conflict between one empire and indigenous collectives that could provide us some important information. And I think it's really important to do it so, to build new narratives to strengthen these research ways, these research theories, because we think we are not being a counterpart to the emergence of local narratives about this conflict, because during the last years And David is a specialist on this topic, and he surely can talk a lot of this situation. We have lived in an increasing amount of festivals, of activities, and the popularization of this idea of conquest and conflict between Romans and indigenous, and what we are not providing to people a counterpart or a solid idea about what's happening here during this period of time. I think that's all, and if you want to follow us, you just need to go to Facebook or our blog or our Twitter, and we try to keep in touch, and we try to share with you or with a broader audience what we are doing right now. Thank you very much.